Stories stir the soul.
Stories reveal.
And stories heal.
In this podcast, we will give you an inside look at someone who's had a life-changing breakthrough.
Real people, real stories with real breakthroughs. As a health and wellness expert and coach, and Todd as a men's mentor,
we've seen firsthand what God can do when it comes to a breakthrough. So lean in, listen well. This could be your biggest breakthrough.
hello, and welcome to this episode of Your Biggest Breakthrough. I'm Wendy Pett.
I'm Todd Isberner.
Yes, and this podcast can be found on the Spark Media Network, which is on the Edify app, pray.com, and Uplifted, KHCB Uplifted Streaming, and so many other platforms. So we're so glad that you are listening wherever you're listening from.
You know, KHCB is a radio station, a legacy radio station.
You know them well.
In Houston.
Yeah, Houston, Texas.
There's some great people down there.
Yeah.
So we're excited to be able to have these various platforms and opportunities, and wherever you're listening, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I want to just start out by just sort of reminding us. I'm going to want to remind you.
Okay.
It's winter here.
Oh, you don't
in
need
Minnesota.
to remind me.
Yeah, that's so. What we really
I
miss.
got my flannel shirt. And
I love that.
Yeah.
We kind of miss, having fires in the fire pit.
Well, we could still
outside.
do it.
Yeah, we could.
Okay.
But there's something about. I mean, everybody I think enjoys staring into a fire on kind of a brisk evening.
Yeah, like
with
a
the
fall.
Yeah, with the flames roaring. Right?
It's mesmerizing.
It is, and then after a while,
Yeah.
you get so mesmerized that you don't notice the fire is actually starting to go out.
You're in a trance. You're like, oh, who's gonna stoke that fire?
Exactly.
I'm like totally relaxed.
And you're getting colder. You're wondering what's going on. Well, you got to stoke the fire, and that's what we're going to talk about on this episode today. We're going to talk about how in the world we can rekindle our first loves.
Yeah.
And we're going to take an honest look at whether or not we've got some dwindling fires in our lives.
Yeah.
And if we do, what do we do about that? How are we going to address that and come up with some ways to restoke that fire again?
Yeah. And whether that's in your faith or a relationship or maybe in your career, there's, multiple areas that maybe we need to be stoked, poked, and
stoked and poked, baby. I seriously think if we'll just take time out to think about this a little bit in the different areas of our lives, we will realize that, well, you know what? I used to have a raging fire there. Right now, it's just
what
like this
happened?
dwindling little,
Barely. It's about to be ashes.
A few sparks rising up, barely. So what happened? Why did we leave? Or what happened that we left our first love in the first place? And actually, you and I got on this subject because we were talking about our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And
not that it's dwindled. No, it's actually been sparked and rekindled.
And I think that's because, we've come across ways that we want to keep rekindling our faith. But this is not a new problem. Jesus addressed this.
Right.
In Revelation, in fact, I have it. Let's see here. I've got to go there. Revelation 3. Let me put on my readers here so I can actually read it accurately. Yeah. So Jesus was talking about losing that first love when John the Apostle in the book of Revelation when he was writing to the church in Laodicea. Here's what Jesus told him to say, and that's this. This is I'm telling you, this is straight stuff. So listen carefully.
It's red letters. It is straight stuff.
It is. Jesus said, "I know all the things that you do, and that you're neither hot or cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are lukewarm, you're neither hot nor cold, I'll spit you out of my mouth." And then Jesus talks about, you say that I'm rich, I have everything I want, I don't need a thing. And isn't that oftentimes the starting point of letting that fire begin to dwindle, because we start to get really proud and arrogant. And Jesus says, he doesn't want us that way at all. We don't want to be that way. You don't want to be that way in your faith, do you?
No, we do not want to be lukewarm and stagnant and stuck and
you want
just status quo.
Alive.
Yeah.
Knowledge and confidence that you and Jesus are one, and you are walking in the power of his Spirit.
Yeah. And
you don't want to start feeling like, I just don't feel like I'm hearing from God.
Right. Or here's the same old prayer routine. Or just, you got to mix things up and rediscover. You know what I mean? There are treasures to learn.
Yes, there are.
Yeah. There's a scripture verse around that.
No, there are many scripture verses around treasure. But I'm thinking even how easy it is in our faith, in our relationship with God, to honestly start to get even a little indifferent. It's almost kind of just sort of a shoulder shrug approach.
Wow.
It's kind of like I've been there, done that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure anymore. And so that could be the case for you. And maybe it's not during this particular season. Maybe you've been through that season. Maybe that season is ahead. So take warning.
Yeah. And maybe it's not with your faith. Maybe it's in a marriage or a relationship. I mean, if you're married, depending on how long you've been married, you know, sometimes things can be like, oh yeah, seen that, done that, talked about that. Oh my gosh, I have to hear that story one more time.
Exactly.
Okay, that's the same joke as yesterday. You know, it becomes the same. So you have to get creative.
I hate that saying.
Intentional. What?
But it's so true. Familiarity can breed contempt. Yeah, it's like, man, oh man, you gonna put some makeup on today? No.
Oh, you actually have said that
brush your
before.
teeth? Oh. I mean, it's easy to get sort of complacent in our marriage because it's the same old, same old. It's then gets stale.
Yeah. So we do things like going back literally to.
We'll get to that.
Oh, we'll get to that. Okay.
Yeah, because right now I just want to acknowledge the fact that it is
happens.
really, really easy for the fires to dwindle.
And not just in your marriage. Yeah, but even maybe friendships. Yeah. I mean, it takes intentionality to keep that spark alive and to keep the relationship going. Or what about with a parent-child relationship? I mean, no matter the stages in which your children are growing and becoming, you got to change it up and learn how to meet one another where they're at in this season. So it's a constant.
You know, you look at this and the fire can dwindle. You need to restoke it in a lot of areas of life. But let's just touch on a couple of others too. Like, for example, work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you're in a place where you've worked at that same job for quite a while. And in fact, it's just now a job. It's no longer a calling or a career.
You don't get excited about it.
Yeah. It's pick up my paycheck and do the same old stuff. And it's, you know, you're bored. You're sort of lifeless in the job. You're not creative anymore. You're disliking the people around you. You dislike the work.
And think of how that ripple effects to the rest of the people around you too. Yeah.
But when it started out, it was all exciting and new. So how do we go back to that? We're gonna touch on a few things later.
And even your personal life with understanding and knowing the vision and the call and the purpose on your life, and maybe you're still asking those questions and trying to discover that for yourself. But maybe you once knew that, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't know if that's still it. And you're just kind of in this lukewarm place. You got to go back to the vision. You got to go back to the dream that God has put on your heart.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about ways maybe we can kind of fix this a little bit as we restoke the fire. Yeah.
Yes.
So like, I guess we got to ask ourselves, like, well, why does that happen? Why does the fire go out in any area of life? And I'm convinced a lot of it has to do with, we just get so distracted by other things. We begin to get preoccupied with things that become priorities that once were not a priority. And once that begins to happen, it sort of overshadows the drive, the passion, the motivation. And before you know it, you're in sort of you're sort of wandering around in the land of the lost.
Well, and there's so many distractions out there, and there's so many that can actually become an addictive distraction. And then, man, that's the worst kind.
Tell me about it. What? I have to fight.
What, you got one?
I have to fight the distraction and the addiction to the news.
Oh, but we don't watch a lot of news.
Not a lot, but enough so that I notice I can get preoccupied. It doesn't matter if it's the liberal take on things or the conservative take on things. It starts to get my mind sort of in a place that it shouldn't.
Negative.
And that's another, I think, big part of the problem. We start to worry.
Yeah.
Because our perception of fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because we're listening to the wrong, the wrong inputs. It's just not feeding our fire well at all.
No, it's very easy for us to stray away from that and then begin to lose your passion and your fire because you're distracted, you're preoccupied, you're worried.
And
there's another one that we wouldn't really expect.
What? Well, like with your career and stuff, success. Maybe you've reached the pinnacle of success and you're like, I got it. Been there. I'm here. I've arrived. And then this pride. Look at what I did
on Facebook, Instagram. Oh, I'm sorry. You know where I'm going.
I know you hate that stuff. But it's that pride and ego and that arrogance that can put you just in a place of just lack, if you want to know the truth, even though you may be at your success place, or you feel like you are, it's actually in a place of just feeling lack because you're not being fulfilled. Even though you've reached a success in your own mind of what success might look like, if you're not being fulfilled, it's not success.
It's pseudo success. It's a facsimile, right? Here's the other thought that hit me as we were talking about this, and that is, it's just pretty easy to go into denial.
Yeah.
About the fire not burning anymore. I just ignore it. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. Just
brush it under the rug.
Yeah, because we don't really think about it, whether or not, I really am on fire in these different areas of my life. Because, friends, we've got to stay on fire.
Yeah, we do.
We have to be willing to rekindle the fires in our lives
constantly,
to stoke whatever we need to, because that way God can also use us to stoke the fires in others.
Yeah. I mean, we would like to be like the Olympic torch, or it's always lit, right?
Yes.
But
pyromaniacs. Spiritually speaking.
There you go.
So what are we going to do about all this? I mean, if we truly want to acknowledge that this is something I need to address, then I guess the next question is, well, what do we do about that? And the first thing is, let's just do a little inventory, a little self-evaluation of where things are actually at.
Yeah. Just evaluate, and you got to ask yourself questions.
Yeah.
You've got to literally be honest with yourself and say, am I in a place of coasting? Am I in a place where I'm just, allowing whatever is on the news or whatever people tell me to just be the truth, or to be the knowledge that I'm to hear that day? Or are you actually seeking real knowledge, real truth, and seeking God's face?
So you're gonna ask yourself some questions to really kind of evaluate whether or not do I have the fire burning here or not.
Yeah.
And honestly, one of the best things to do is to ask your spouse. Are you noticing some areas of my life where I'm just like?
Are you asking me right now?
No, I'm not.
You want me to tell you?
Oh, wait.
But that's really a good idea. Save it for when.
Listen, if you're
you want me to stoke the fire, or
loving spouses are there to help one another.
Yeah.
Not criticize, not pull you down.
Iron sharpens iron.
And you truly do. There are times where I think you've addressed me on some things. I've addressed you on some things where I know I could level up to a new place, and I could stoke that fire.
Yeah.
Recreate some of the things that might be dwindling or missing.
Yeah, because sometimes, again, we're in denial. We don't notice it. We're coasting, and we think, this is good. But then someone around us, close to us, sees it. And if you can lovingly mention it, which he does, but also be in a place of not being on the defensive. That's a big piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely true. And I think there's something so freeing about coming to a place of admission.
Yeah.
If you sort of evaluate where you're at in terms of the temperature of your fire for God, for others, for work, for your vision life, if you've really evaluated, you know what, I'm not where I really want to be.
Yeah.
Once you admit that becomes so freeing, because it allows you then to make a decision.
Yeah.
Well, what am I going to do about it?
And maybe it's not, Todd, just where you want to be. Maybe it's knowing, I'm not where God really
there you go.
wants me to be.
Exactly.
Like, because sometimes we can be where we want to be. Like,
yeah.
Hey, this is really
comfortable
good.
Here. Yeah, let's put my feet up on
someone else needs to put another log on the fire. I'm good right here.
Exactly.
So maybe just going a little deeper, like, okay, am I really rising up to what God has called me to do and be while here?
Well, and if not, then you've made that decision. Okay, I've admitted it after I've evaluated it, and now I've made a decision. It is going to change. I am going to make this different.
Or you've made a decision that is not going to change. So,
please don't.
Please don't do that. We need you to rise up.
So let's just give you 3 simple suggestions. There are many ways in which you can go about this, but 3 things that Wendy and I are considering about just continuing to stoke fires in our lives. Number 1 is to
go back to the beginning. Yeah. I mean, even at Revelation 2:5, part of the verse says, do the things you did at first. So do you recall? Do you remember what you did at first? Do you remember when you first met your spouse, or when you first had your child? Do you remember just the joy, the interaction, the excitement? And if not, why not? And then also go to a place where what can start to stoke that flame. And so Todd and I sometimes will go through our wedding album, and I'm like, oh, remember that. And it's just kind of fun to rekindle, go back to those first moments, and it starts to spur things.
We've talked to other couples who, when they're in a not a very good spot in their marriage, we'll oftentimes ask them, well, why in the world did you get married in the first place?
Right.
And we'll help them go back to the beginning
and
of
just
what
tell
it was.
them their story.
About their spouse, what they fell in, why they fell in love, and what happened in the beginning stages of that marriage. So that is a great, very practical thing we can do when it comes to marriage. Go back to the beginning of when you first were dating, and what the feelings were like, what attracted you to each other, because that stuff is still all there.
It is.
The reasons why you fell in love, and I don't like that term fell in love, but you committed to loving each other because of all of those wonderful things you experienced in the beginning. And sure, some of that stuff might be covered up, but you can uncover it. And it starts with you, not with your spouse. Like, how come you don't blah, blah, blah?
That's good. That's good. Right. It does start with you. And same with friendships, right? Yeah. Maybe the friendship is gotten a little like, they don't call me, so I'm not going to call them. Or, it just becomes just very different. So it's going back to what connected you to begin with, and why do you have that friendship, and do you covet it enough to take action and be intentional?
Well, it works with your work or career as well. If you really find like I'm very stagnant right now, I feel very stale, I feel very bored. There are ways you can go back to the beginning of when you first started in that position. Why did you take that job? What excited you about it? And if it's not there, obviously you can do something about it. Go get a different job or change career paths. But there's always something can be done to either rekindle the fire or start a new fire somewhere.
Like right now, I'm thinking about my niece, and she wants to be an architect. And so she has started to do some intern work for an architectural firm. And man, she is just thriving. She's doing so great. And she's so proud of herself. And she's showing me some of her drawings. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I can just see the fire lit. And so now she's starting to go to school for architecture, and she's already got that fire burning, and I can see that. And so hopefully I will encourage her, be someone in her life to encourage her to keep that going and to remind her of these early days.
And when the fires are burning, I mean, it gives us life and energy and vision and purpose and motivation as to why we want to get up in the morning.
And it sparks other people's fires.
Absolutely true. Hey, I just want to go back to faith for a minute too, in terms of rekindling that, because I really think all of these other things are an outgrowth of where we're at in our relationship with God.
Good point.
And if you go back to the beginning of when you first realized how much God loves you, you realized how unworthy and undeserving you were. You realized that God's grace so enveloped you. You started to literally experience a reality of his presence in your life. And you don't have that now. So I want to suggest to all of us that we go back and we start rekindling and restoking those fires.
First love.
The first thing we have to do is look, you fell in love with his word. Like, you remember in the beginning, maybe you were sort of indifferent towards the Bible. And then once that relationship started to really catch on, you couldn't wait to read your Bible. You couldn't wait to pray. You couldn't wait to talk about Jesus with others. Where is that? Well, it's still there. You just got to make an effort to go back to the beginning of that and restart that fire if you have to.
And maybe you've never been there. Maybe you're listening and you've never, ever had that fire going. I want to encourage you to go and dive into God's word and to start letting his voice speak to your heart in a way that only he can speak to you, because man,
just ask him.
Just ask him.
My younger daughter years ago felt she was a bit stale in her faith, and she simply prayed, God, will you please help me love you? I really, really want
so innocent and wonderful.
I mean, God was waking her up in the morning, and she was just, the word was exploding. She was overwhelmed with this sense of God's love, which caused her to really, really want to love God back. And that resulted in loving others.
Man, so good. So good.
So here's a second suggestion.
Yeah. Get hungry again. And I don't mean, in the kitchen, eat all the food. I'm talking have a hunger for that fire in your life to burn, whether it's your faith, your marriage, your other relationships, your career. It was once said that hunger is the ultimate driver. If you're hungry, you can get the strategy. You can get the answer. If you can't model it, you can find it. So sometimes we get hung up on, but how? Well, if you're hungry enough, you will find.
That's true.
You will find the how and
Start
the
eating grass if you got
it. Right. Hey, I recommend that. No,
you would. Wheatgrass.
a few grass shots. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, it's really you gotta have that hunger.
Yeah.
If you're just like stale and you're not hungry, then you're not going to go find it.
And
You're not gonna
sometimes
go seeking.
It's sometimes the way we can get hungry is we confront ourselves with some pretty direct
Tough
questions.
stuff.
Like, if I stay in this place, what's the outcome going to be? What is my life going to look like next year or in 5 years? If I just stay indifferent and I don't get hungry and get motivated, how do I stoke that fire? And if I don't stoke that fire, what's going to happen? Now, we're kind of mixing analogies of stoking the fire and getting hungry, but you get the idea. In fact, I just thought about
what
one
s'mores over the fire.
Yeah, that too. No, I actually went back to my childhood where Dad would make a big fire in the fire pit, and we'd all get again so mesmerized. We have great talks around the fire, the whole family, and then it started to dwindle down. Well, Dad liked shortcuts that were effective. He had a little can of gasoline over here.
Oh, you've talked about this before.
He'd throw the gas in the fire, it would just explode. So you've got to find where that gas is and throw it on that fire if you really are serious about making certain those fires are burning strongly in your faith, in your family relationships, in your work, maybe in your fitness and health. Maybe that's an area you just got like,
hello,
I just whatever.
That's one to really get that fire burning in for sure. And then the other thing is to get help.
Yeah,
that's
there's kind of a third suggestion.
Yeah, so accountability, get help. We've talked about that numerous times here on Your Biggest Breakthrough, but it's really a breakthrough for so many to realize I just need help. Yeah. I need to get help. I can't do it on my own. I mean, think about it. How many years have you been going through the same just coasting kind of place in your life? Has it worked for you yet doing it on your own? Probably not. So where can you get the help and be assertive? I think so often we're feeling like ashamed or kind of like, proud that, we don't want to go out and reach out for help, but that's where things start to shift.
Yeah. I mean, you're so right about that. I know for certain that finding the right atmosphere, the right friendships, the right books and podcasts and whatever it takes.
Podcasts.
Yes. It'll help kind of rekindle some things in your life.
So that's the plan.
But seriously, you and I right now are going through, in terms of rekindling, not rekindling, but just stoking, keeping the fires burning in our faith. We're going through a little exercise, 21 days of prayer.
Yeah, by Jim Maxim.
In deepening your relationship with the Lord.
It's great.
And so what's happening is Wendy and I are literally reading just a short little, it's kind of like a devotional teaching. And
he will be on the podcast soon.
Yes.
So be on the lookout.
Yeah,
yes.
Help reignite your faith. This truly, I'm thinking about what he's written. And then we listen to about 5 minutes of prayer and sort of join and pray with him.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling myself challenged, motivated, inspired, refreshed.
Yeah, this is good. Don't tell him too much because we're going to talk about it on the podcast with him.
But the point is,
so stay hungry for that podcast coming up.
If you find people or books or resources that you can lean into, it will help develop a rekindling of that fire. Yeah. Don't you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Well, you better.
110%. Isn't that what people say?
Yeah. So those are 3 simple suggestions of what can be done. Go back to the beginning in each one of your areas, find out what it was in the beginning that lit that fire, and then get hungry again. Ask yourself some very hard, serious questions and like, what's the outcome going to be? And then the third thing is to absolutely surround yourself, get the right kind of help. Don't try to do this on your own. There are easier ways to do it if you will just humble yourself and ask for some help.
Yeah. So true. I love it. Well, we sure hope that this episode blessed you. It was something that we were talking about in our prayer chair earlier. And we thought, you know what? I think this could bless the listeners a bit. So if it did, please share this podcast episode with others.
Yeah. And remember what's at stake here. I mean, really just
what's at stake?
In all seriousness.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, God created you for a very, very important reason. And God wants to be in relationship with you. He doesn't want it to grow stale. Right. Nothing's changed on God's side. Nothing's changed on the other side of where you think things have been that's caused you to become stale in whatever area it is or where your fire is dwindling.
Right. Which reminds me, I'm sorry to just cut you
Yeah,
off.
no.
Like, I think so often human nature is to focus on the failures and that you're not good enough and just all the ick instead of focusing on the greater things and start to look up, basically look up to him and his truth.
Yeah, so let's be real about this and let's get excited about this and let's ask God to help us stoke some of these fires in our lives that maybe are starting to go out. And God can do that, and God will do that because he knows how serious you are about, first and foremost, staying in close relationship with him. Have a fire that's just raging hot for God. And that's going to really spill over to others.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, bless you all. Thanks for tuning in. And we will catch you next time on Your Biggest Breakthrough. Take care. Head on over to yourbiggestbreakthrough.com, where you'll find some free resources and information and a place where you can comment. And we would love to dialogue with you there. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.